Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 22, part 3 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. In this episode, we are continuing on with our series. This is part 3 of talking about shooting fundamentals. And in this one, we're going to be talking about the proper grip for the rifle as well as some breathing. So we're going to keep working down this list piece by piece, going over each part, trying to help you, the shooter, get the best out of your shooting that you can. So without further ado, here we go. So thank you for joining us again, and welcome to episode 22. This is part 3 of our fundamental series, and in this one, we're going to be talking about proper grip for the rifle, as well as some breathing. So we want to continue down this list and talking about all these little things and fundamentals that we should be paying attention to as a shooter, get them piece by piece in order, and then, of course, at the end of these series, we're going to try to tie it all together in a format that sort of helps and makes sense for you, the shooter. So proper grip for the rifle. Sounds pretty simple, right? When we're gripping the rifle, we want to use a firm handshake grip. Now, your thumb can either be wrapped around the tang of the stock, laid right on top, off to the side of the tang a little bit, can lay it on a thumb shelf if you like. Just remember that whatever position you put your thumb in, some people like to wrap their thumb around the stock, some people lay it up by the tang, some people shoot with it off to the side. Now, I will say personally, I am not a big fan of taking the thumb off to the side and setting it on like a thumb shelf or something along that lines. I like to actually grip the rifle, so my thumb is either on top or wrapped around depending on which stock I'm shooting. And I use a firm handshake grip for this, and this is really important. You'll see some guys using a loose grip shooting in a prone position, letting the rifle almost slide through their hands as the gun fires. That leads for some great precision shooting. There's no doubt that the technique works. However, though, for me as a shooter, I would rather have one grip that works well for every position because we don't just shoot prone. We might shoot off the nook of a tree. We might shoot off a backpack. We might shoot off our buddy's shoulder. I mean, I can just give you a list of areas that we're going to shoot from that at this point now we got to grip the rifle. It's going to just slide out of our hands. And so I use a firm handshake grip because I can adopt one grip for the rifle, and I can use it from any position regardless of which I am shooting it from. Now, we'll talk about the ergonomically correct stocks, and that is your thumb holes or pistol grip. They've been around for a long time. They've known to be correct for many, many years. So if you look at the M16, the Accuracy International, all of the new tactical stocks from Remington and Savage, you're going to see vertical or pistol grips. Now, I'm a big fan of these type of stocks because they actually allow you to grip the stock in a position that's ergonomically correct for your hand. So when you're gripping it how your hand was designed to grip things. And I always like to say that the difference is one type of stock, like your traditional hunting stock, where you have that really roll up where you come up to the tang of the rifle. And so you're rolling your wrist forward, trying to hold on to it. And when the gun fires, it slides through your hands. The vertical grips or pistol grips or thumb holes allow you to put some of that stock in the palm of your hand. So that allows us, A, to drive the rifle. You know, we have much, much better control of it. But then, B, it actually helps absorb some of the recoil and stuff into the palm of your hand rather than all of it onto your shoulder. So for you Magnum shooters out there, it really makes quite a big difference to actually shoot a rifle that has a little bit of a vertical grip because it allows you to absorb some of the recoil into your hand itself. Not a bad thing. Now, another thing that's really important, and I talk about this at the shooting school, is loosen your pinky finger up ever so slightly. This is one of those little side notes that might not seem like it makes a lot of sense here, or you may have heard it or may not have heard it, but loosen your pinky finger up on your firing hand ever so slightly. The reason I'm telling you to do that is your pinky is like a fulcrum. It's the furthest away from the center of the barrel. If you grip with the same amount of pressure as with the rest of your fingers, sometimes you have a tendency to torque the stock under recoil. And so I always like to loosen my pinky finger up ever so slightly. Now, I'm not telling you to stick your pinky out like you're drinking a fancy cup of tea. Someone's going to make fun of you, and then you're going to say, well, Jamie said do it, and then I'm going to deny. But I am telling you to loosen that finger up ever so slightly. We're talking about nitpicking, and we're talking about trying to shoot the best that you can at distance in the smallest groups that you can. So in doing that, I have to point this out and say, loosen that pinky finger up ever so slightly. Now, in the last podcast, I did touch base on stock and stock designs, and we threw a little plug out there about why we use a lot of the Macmillan A-Series, or what's considered the Game Warden, when we build a custom rifle, especially for the hunting rifles. And that has a lot to do with the vertical grip. We really want to control the rifle through recoil. We want to be able to control the rifle as if we're driving the car, not just a passenger in the seat. And these rifles and the grip design areas really allow us to do just that. I'm just a huge fan of it. The other thing that the stocks do besides the grip is, of course, they've got a little bit wider forearm as well as some flats on the side. Now, that might sound absolutely trivial on a hunting rifle, but as a shooter, being able to get that little flat spot onto a log or a door frame, whatever, if you're in a match or you're shooting off a barricade, not having that rounded portion on the bottom of the stock gives you that much more contact on all the surfaces, again, allowing you to control the rifle with a firm handshake grip, allowing you to control the rifle. The flat sides, just having a little bit vertical side, not rounded off like you see a lot of your traditional hunting stocks. Being able to push that rifle into an L or a corner. So if you can picture shooting off the nook of a tree, or where there's a branch coming out, and you can slide the rifle over the branch to the actual edge of the tree itself, and you can sort of hold that stock, and now it's got a flat spot on the bottom and a flat spot on the side to sort of get a good purchase on the tree, level the rifle up. These little things make a difference when you're trying to shoot at distance and controlling the rifle. Again, going right back into having a firm handshake grip on the rifle. Now, I am saying firm handshake grip. Firm handshake grip is not the grip where you're trying to squeeze the blood out of somebody's hands. You ever shake that guy's hands, and when you shake their hand, they hang on an extra minute or two just for emphasis as they crush the bones in your hand. We're not talking about that. And we're not talking about the spaghetti finger guy either. You shake somebody's hands and it's like shaking a bag of wet noodles. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a good, firm handshake grip. That's how we want to grip the rifle. And again, all we're trying to do is just control how the rifle's acting under recoil in a repeatable manner. So it's something that we want to be able to do over and over and over again and get the same results. Now, I like to call it, the definition of insanity is, I guess, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. But there's this thing called shooter's insanity, where we do something different every time we're touching the rifle and somehow expect to get the same results. And so the firm handshake grip, little pinky out, that plays a big role in trying to keep us out of shooter's insanity and allow us to really just try to hone in and focus on our skill set and put the shot really repeatable where we want it to go every single time. And then on to the next thing on our list is, so if you're keeping track of the list that we keep building here, and again, we're going to come up with a mental checklist at the end of this whole series, and we're going to give you a list of items in order in which we want to pay attention to them. But the next thing I want to talk about in the series itself is just breathing and what we want to be doing when we're shooting. Controlling your breath while you're shooting and shooting during your natural respiratory pause. That's a really big deal. Breathing really is necessary while we're shooting. It does get hard to see straight if you stop for quite a while, but we really do want to control it. So your chest does rise and fall each time you take a breath, and when you're on a rifle, a lot of times so do your crosshairs. So you really do have to pick a pause in your breathing cycle in order to fire the round off. Now, the natural respiratory pause is what I do. So you take a big deep breath in, you let it out, and where it stops naturally, you just hold your breath. Now, you still have lots of air in your lungs. You could go breathe in, breathe out, and then You could push out all of this extra air still in your lungs. Some people will do that when they shoot. They actually go to the bottom of their breath. I actually don't like to do that. It feels like I'm starving for oxygen. So I just take a breath in, let it come out naturally, and where it stops, that's where I hold my breath. When you are doing this, one thing to take into consideration, when you're getting set up on target, just make sure that you get the shot off within 3 to 13 seconds after you start holding your breath. For example, we like to go out and shoot woodchucks a lot. And you go through this mental checklist, you get to the breathing portion of it, you pause your breath, and the groundhog goes down from the standing position to the ground position. And you're waiting, and you're waiting, and you're waiting for him to stand back up so you can get a nice shot at him. If you can't get the shot off within 3 to 13 seconds, just start breathing all over again and wait for that process to start again. So when the target presents itself again, take that natural respiratory pause, hold your breath, and then get the shot off. If, again, the target moves or it goes down, like in the case of a woodchuck, well, then you have to wait again. Just don't rush the shot. So I've hunted with people in the past where you'll hear them go through this part, and they're holding their breath, waiting to shoot, and the groundhog is still on the ground. The groundhog is still flat on the ground. And by the way, they're pretty small when they're laying down like that. And then you take into consideration that they're 500, 600, 700 yards out there. That's a small target. About 10 or 12 seconds will go by and the gun will fire. Now, the groundhog didn't stand up. It's just that they're getting tired of holding their breath and they're just going to go ahead and throw one at them. Where me personally, unless it's an area where you're just running out of time to shoot or the animal's walking off the field, something like that, then of course you're going to take the shot. But in a situation like that, start the whole process over again and wait for them to stand back up and then hold your breath again. So don't rush the shot. If the shot takes 3 to 13 seconds, great. If it takes longer than that, though, start the breathing process all over again and just reset when you're ready to shoot. So where does this apply? It really does sound like a very simple and silly thing to have to say. It's something that a lot of people do automatically and something you really don't have to think about. But the truth of the matter is we put this on our little mental checklist because there are scenarios to where you'll forget, especially when you start getting under pressure. Remember we talked about the cheek weld and cheek pressure. The pressure is a really, really big deal. Not so much when you're relaxed at your home range, but when you're actually on a hunting trip of a lifetime or you're in a match where the pressure is getting to you or it's a timed event. All of a sudden you'll find yourself clamping down on that rifle, and in doing that, you're going to start changing your point of impact ever so slightly. Well, the same thing happens with breathing as well. So one of my favorite things years and years ago in shooting matches was this thing called a Heartbreaker. It was one of my favorite things to shoot when I was younger. And what they would do, and when you go to, like, especially with the older sniper matches that they used to hold, I'm not sure about with all the PRS stuff, I'm sure that there's barricades and stuff where you move around quickly and you're starting to breathe pretty heavy, but a lot of the stuff that they would put in these matches were intentionally designed to make you not think about your fundamentals and screw up the shot. So one of the things, and my favorite things to shoot, was a thing called a Heartbreaker. And what they would make you do is they would make you go and set your rounds behind you 10 yards, something like that. Not stupid distance, but 10, 15 yards, something. And then you would have a target at distance. A lot of times it was like a B-27 target where there was a 10 ring. And they would give you 2 to 3 minutes. And you would have that amount of time to run back and get one round at a time and shoot 10 shots on target for score. So 10 rings would be 100 points. So the pressure is on. So when you run back to your rifle and grab that round and you run back and dive into the rifle and throw the round in and close the bolt and you shoot. Now keep in mind your heart and your respiratory is up big time. I mean, you're like, you're just breathing away. I mean, you can't get enough oxygen because you're hustling. But if you don't remember to pause that breath just for that split second to take that shot, you're not going to hit the 10 ring very often. You're going to hit high, you're going to hit low, you're going to hit high, you're going to hit low. So one of the greatest pieces of advices I've gotten in a match shooting was from a good friend of mine named John Markwell. He said to me many, many, many years ago, he said, Jamie, you can't miss fast enough to win a match. And I thought that was some great advice. Same thing here. Slow down, pause that breath, take the shot, and then jump off the gun breathing like a maniac and run back and get the next round and dive back into the rifle. To keep building on the things that we've already talked about. Keep in mind, here's where cheek pressure comes into play. You're clamping down on the rifle, you're tired, your head forgets it's got a butt attached, and so you're doing all kinds of goofy things fundamentally with the rest of your body. You're not lining up with the rifle properly. We were talking about body position. Here's where body position comes into play. When I dive into a rifle, especially years ago in these types of matches, I wouldn't dive into the rifle straight on. I would actually dive into the rifle a little bit of an angle in the angle that I shoot the rifle in. So it would be silly for me to dive straight in and try to do the shimmy shake left and try to build that natural point of aim with the rifle, when all I would have to do is to skip a couple of those steps is dive into the rifle in the angle I shoot it at. And so if you were shooting a rifle and you shoot straight onto the rifle, then of course dive straight into the rifle, pull back into your shoulder, and get ready to shoot. But if you lay at a little bit of an angle, when you dive into the rifle, I'm not saying run a half a circle and dive into it sideways, but when I would jump into the rifle, I would get into it at the angle, like I would hit my knees and go straight into the rifle in the angle that I shoot it best at. And I've had lots of great results with this at matches. But here's where that natural respiratory pause comes into play. They would put out a stage like this for shooters to be so focused on trying to get those 10 rounds down and trying to hustle that they would totally forget about holding their breath in the shot, and they would fire the round off just in an effort to jump up and get another round down range. Same thing holds true for those going out on a hunting trip. I got blessed once. I got a chance to go to Idaho and walk up and down the mountains out there. We're from Pennsylvania. Our mountains are really like a 15-minute hill at best. I mean, I know we have some bigger mountains here, but not where I live. So that was a great experience, and I can see how a hunter going to the top of a ridge for some animals that are just went over the other side, when you got to the top, I mean, now you're talking like 1,200 feet or taller, just from where you're at to get to this ridge. Or it might be a half a mile down the valley, then up 12, 14, 1,500 feet up the side of this hill. And you get to the top of that hill, and there they are. You are sucking as much air into your body as you can get. I mean, you're probably at that point starving for oxygen. But you've got to take a second or two to calm down and try to get that natural respiratory pause worked in there to take that shot. Or again, all this effort that you put in to get in that position to take the shot could be wasted with either a bad shot or even a complete miss. So practice, how you intend to use it. And then when you use it how you practice it, I guess would be a great way to put it. Now, in next week's podcast is going to be part 4 of this series. We're going to talk about trigger control, and there is a lot to talk about with trigger control. If you get a chance to go back and listen to some of our podcasts in the past, you might find some information on triggers, and we talk a little bit about them there. I want to touch base on some little things now. This is not fundamentally listed items, but these are things that are important for you, the shooter, to pay attention to. So I just want to point out a couple things as we keep moving forward. So let's just call this the tips before we move on to the next podcast. So number 1, if you're shooting a rifle that has a stud in the bottom of the rear of the stock, get that stud out of there. The rifles we build have flush cups, either on the side or on the bottom, that we can detach our sling and slide it out of the way without the stud staying behind. The reason I'm telling you that is that stud is a grab or a catch point on your rear bag. So if you're using a rear bag, which is what we use in shooting, under recoil, that stud can come back and either bounce, catch, or drag on that bag. So if your rifle has a stud in it, get it out of there. If you can get a flush cup put in its place, get a flush cup put in. But remove that stud. The same thing goes for the cheek pieces that we were talking about, that you can get a good cheek weld, cheek pressure. If your rifle doesn't have a cheek piece, you can buy, like Cheek Ease is one that you can purchase that sort of glues to the top without destroying it. But they have these Eagle stock packs that have these straps that go under the stock of the rear. That's how they mount onto the stock. Well, everything that you do in shooting has a pro and has a con. So you're able to put a cheek rest on there, basically, that you can get good cheek weld and maybe some cheek pressure. But now you've made all of these tripping points under the stock itself to grab and pull on the shooting bag under recoil. So I'm not a big fan of anything underneath the rifle, especially back in that area, because it can catch and grab and throw a shot. So everything that you do can have a pro and a con. I sort of like that Gotta Grip and Cheekies because they do allow you to put to build up that cheek weld area without having anything under the rifle. But please remember that if your rifle has a stud in a match or on a hunting trip, think about getting that out of there and putting a flush cup in its place or coming up with a better way to do that. Now, another tip when it comes to the stock when we're shooting, this is all tip segments, so we're just throwing a bunch of little things out there to keep in mind. When we're shooting, this isn't fundamentals, these are shooter's tips. Make sure that the toe or heel of the rifle isn't dug directly into the bag or into the ground. Under recoil, that can act like a fulcrum where it digs in and allows the rifle to recoil up in the front rather than slide to the rear. So make sure that the heel or toe of that rifle or that butt pad isn't dug directly into the bag itself on the face of it, and then you're pushing it and holding it in place in there, or make sure it's not on the ground. Again, that gives it a place to catch or grab and do some really goofy stuff under recoil. Another thing when it comes to using shooting bags is I have a general rule of thumb here, and this is important for making long-range shots. Number one, we use a thing called doggone good bags. They make a block that's 2x3x4 and 3x4x5, so you can spin it to all these different areas to raise and lower the rear of the stock ever so slightly. So you lay it flat, it's 2 inches. You stand it up, it's 3 inches. You flip it on its side, it's 4 inches. But you have to make sure that the bag is straight in to the rifle. If you shoot with the bag 45 degrees to the rifle itself, so you can picture the straight line of the shooter's bag. These are squares. If it's off to the side ever so slightly, under recoil, it will fall to the straight edge of the bag and pull your rifle left or right. So make sure that if you're using a rear bag like that it's perfectly straight, like a T in line with the rifle. That way, if the bag falls, it falls to the rear. It's not pulling your rifle left or right. Another tip to get into when you're using a rear bag is don't stack them. Nothing good happens when you start stacking multiple bags underneath the rear of the rifle. It's sliding around. All of those are interacting with each other, and under recoil, bad things can happen. So we don't recommend stacking bags. Another thing to take into consideration with shooting bags, hold the bag, hold the rifle with your hand on the bag, but don't try to hold both together. When we're shooting, if we have the rifle resting on the rear shooting bag, we can squeeze the bag a little bit and adjust our elevation up and down ever so slightly. The trick is to hold that squeeze through the shot so the rifle just doesn't relax on a soft bag. That works great. If that doesn't work, we can put our hand on the bag and make like a reverse U with our thumb and our fingers into our shoulder, and give the rifle stock itself two sides to slide through. So on one side, the rifle is going to slide and be guided through your thumb, and on the other side, it's going to slide and be guided right through your fingers. And you want that slide or guide to be straight in line with the rifle. And you can rest your hand on the rear bag. So let's just say you can't get enough elevation. You're shooting downhill at an animal. Bag isn't tall enough. You stick your hand on the bag, and then you put your rifle in your hand. But don't ever try to hold both at the same time. That is just one of my things. The reason being is you make this really awkward joint type thing where nothing's touching anything. So you've got the bag on the ground. You're holding it at the top. You've got the rifle in your hand. It's sort of touching the bag, but then you've got this joint area that you're trying to hold both of them through the shot. And it just doesn't lead to a great shot. So I like to either rifle on the bag or rifle in my hand and let my hand rest on the bag, but never both together. I don't hold both together. Another tip, make sure that there's clearance between the back of your hand and the actual front area of the stock. So you'll see a lot of these pistol grips or thumb holes have this part of the stock that comes down. Make sure that there's a gap between that area and the bag and the back of your hand. Don't get those so close together that under recoil, the rifle's coming back and bouncing off your hand or off the bag at the grip area. make sure that you keep that bag back towards the rear of the stock, or your hand back towards the rear of the stock, so there's a gap between the back of your hand and any place on the stock that could come back and touch it under recoil. Now, keep in mind, I did say we don't want the bag completely off the back of the stock to where the toe or heel is in the middle of it. We don't want to dig the toe or heel into that area. But we want to make sure that it's not so far forward that the rifle can, under recoil, come back and actually bounce off your hand. That will influence your shot as well. And last but not least, I touched base on this, I believe, about the Protector bunny ear bags. And they're a bench rest bag. We use them flipped around backwards, so we use them differently than what bench rest shooters use them for. But I really do think they're a great tool for training and learning the art of long-range shooting. We sell them here at the school. The model number is considered a 93B, and if you do a web search for Protector, you can buy them filled. And if you buy them filled, now keep in mind they're filled with sand or heavy sand, and that's how we bring them in for sale here at the school, which you can buy them empty, and you can fill them with what's called doll fill or baby doll fill, if you think of like a child's baby doll or stuffed animal. You buy those at a craft store. Absolute pain in the butt to do it. I do have one that's probably 18 years old or older that's filled with doll fill. I actually carry them in matches. It's probably the only other bag out of them, my little doggone good bags that I carry for really long-range precision shots. And one of the reasons why I like them here, especially for the school, is you can pinch the ears from the prone position just like you would with your hand, and the rifle will ride straight through the ears into your shoulder. Now, this is important to learn how this is supposed to feel, because without it, it's like a car spinning tire that's sort of fishtailing a little bit. And so those bunny ears take that little bit of fishtail out and sort of teach you how the rifle is supposed to behave and feel under recoil. Then it allows you to mimic it with your hand or other bags. So I really like them here at the school. I also like them because we used a tall one. So you can get a short one or tall. It allows the rifle to be up further into the shoulder. And I find that a lot of shooters shoot a little bit better off the ground than laying perfectly flat. Brings their head and shoulders up ever so slightly, so they're looking through their optics more naturally, rather than if you can pitch somebody laying flat on the ground completely and then tell them to bend their head back at a 90-degree angle to look through optics. So you'd have to stand on the back of their neck and reach down and grab by their hair and pull their head backwards. If you're able to get your body up off the ground ever so slightly, for example, how these bags make customers do, a lot of times you'll find that looking through the optics, you're looking more naturally straight through. People that shoot with glasses on it just sort of show you what this is like. If they're too low and too prone, their head is down too far. They can't pick their head up high enough, and they're actually looking through the top or brim of their glass, or their glasses if they're wearing glasses. So rather than looking straight through their glasses or safety glasses, they're actually looking at that top edge through their optics. So just getting them up a little bit more off the ground, using those bunny ears allowed them to have the head facing forward in more of a natural position, and allows you to look straight through your optics a little bit easier. Now, you can adjust the up and down elevation with those bags by just simply raising the rifle in the bag and pinching the ears ever so slightly, and then just to remember to hold that pinch through the shot. Let the rifle slide through the bag naturally into your shoulder, and then push back forward. A couple of things to be careful of, though. Couple of things to keep in mind is you have to make sure, again, to hold that pinch through the shot if you're pinching the ears to hold the reticle in place. So let's just say you're looking at a 100-yard target, your reticle is ever so slightly higher than the target, and you need to bring the front of the rifle down, you bring the rear of the rifle up, you're dead center in the bullseye, pinch your ears, and then hold that pinch through the shot. Now make sure that your left hand, if you're a right-handed shooter that's pinching the ears, isn't touching anywhere else on the stock other than the bag. Remember, we don't want our hand either bouncing off the stock under recoil or touching both at the same time. You're either holding the stock or you're holding the bag. Never both at the same time. So we got to make sure that that happens. And here's the last tip I want to give you. You'll find that a particular rifle, let's just say for me, if I'm shooting perfectly straight at 100 yards and I take a Harris 6-9 or an Atlas PSR bipod, and I have this height that I bring the front to, and with with combination of the rear bag, that I can look at that target at 100 yards. And let's just say that fits really, really well. So it's on the Atlas PSR. Let's just say I'm one notch up on the legs. That's where the front height is set. For me to bring the rifle up into my shoulder properly to the proper height, which the butt pad, top of the butt pad should be ever so slightly at the top of your shoulder, not dug into your shoulder. You want the rifle to be square on your shoulder, not down below it, so where you're laying on the top edge of the pad. You want that above the shoulder line ever so slightly. You'll find that that's your sweet spot. Here's a really good thing to keep in mind. When you're in that position, remember that. As you're changing targets up and down, if time allows, leave the rear of the rifle alone and adjust the front up and down, because that is where you're going to take your best shot. That rifle in that shoulder where you're at looking through your optics is your sweet spot or ideal position. So if you went from shooting straight and now you had to shoot uphill and all you did was remove the rear bag and go lower on the gun, now you've got to bend your head back further to see through your optics. Or you're shooting downhill, so rather than lowering your bipod, you just jack the rear of the rifle up. Well, now your cheek weld, cheek pressure, eye relief, where you're looking through your optics, all of that has changed a lot. And so if you really want to take your best shot, now we're talking if time allows. Now, if you're shooting an elk at 200 yards walking off the field, bad time to be reaching up and playing with the bipod all over the place, right? But if you're taking a 1,000-yard shot on a groundhog silhouette like we're going to have here at the school, pretty big deal. Just take a couple minutes, reach up and adjust the feet of the bipod up or down ever so slightly to get you on target, and leave that rifle in the sweet spot. That is your, in the shoulder, leave the rear of the rifle alone. Adjust the front first, rear second. The rear of the rifle, once you have this all set up and you have a comfortable position that you like a lot, leave that as your A game. Everything else then you modify if you have to for speed. On to the next episode that we're going to be talking about, and the next part of our series, which is going to be part 4, we're going to dive into trigger control. Now, like cheek weld and cheek pressure, at first glance, it looks like, it's just another trigger conversation. We're hoping to go well beyond that and talk about these little things and details that, when added together, make a huge, huge difference. On the next episode, when we go into part 4 of our fundamental series, we're going to be talking about triggers, and there's so many things to talk about. I know it can be a subject that's over-discussed, but what we're going to talk about is all the fine little details that make a big difference when you get into long-range shooting, and we're going to nitpick a little bit, and hopefully give you some pointers and things that you've done or things that you're doing and sort of straighten you out a little bit and give you some ideas of how to get the absolute best shot out of the rifle. So the next podcast, please join us. It's going to be a great conversation. So that is it for this podcast. I really appreciate you tuning in, and thank you for joining us. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host. Please feel free to send me some emails if you have any questions. Our email is contact@wolfprecision.net. Our website, of course, is wolfprecision.net, where you can look at everything that we do as far as our shooting schools or our custom rifles. Love to help in any way that we can with that. But again, thank you for joining. We really appreciate you being here, and you are listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.